March 28, 1945. Near Hammelburg, Germany. The rain had stopped, but the road still looked black with mud and blood. A column of exhausted American infantry from the 14th Armored Division moved past a burned-out farm wagon when Private Eddie Nolan saw the shape beside the ditch and raised one trembling hand. "Hold up." No one answered at first. The men were too tired to joke, too cold to complain, and too used to seeing bodies where bodies should not be. Then Corporal Vince Barlow stepped closer and froze. It was a woman. She was still alive. A Red Cross nurse lay half-covered with a horse blanket, her gray uniform torn open at the shoulder, one sleeve dark with dried blood, her face swollen so badly it barely looked human. Her shoes were gone. Her wrists were raw. One of her Red Cross patches had been cut off with a knife. And 20 feet away, tied to a shattered fence post with field telephone wire, stood a German officer staring at the ground as if none of it had anything to do with him. No one spoke. The wind moved through the ruined trees. Then the nurse opened her eyes and whispered, "Don't let him touch anyone else." That was when everything changed. Sergeant Daniel Mercer dropped to one knee beside her. "Ma'am, you're safe now. You hear me? You're safe." Her lips shook. She tried to lift a hand, failed, and turned her face away from the German officer. Behind Mercer, Private Nolan stared at the man tied to the post. Captain silver on the collar. Black leather gloves still tucked into his belt. Boots polished, even now. His name tag read K. Richter. Lieutenant Paul Haskins walked up from the road, took one look at the nurse, and stopped cold. "Who found him?" he asked. "Locals pointed him out," Barlow said. "Said he was trying to surrender with the others." Haskins looked at the wire around the officer's chest. "Who tied him?" No one answered. That silence told him enough. The nurse tried to speak again. Mercer bent low to hear her. "He used the hospital cellar," she whispered. Said the emblem meant nothing anymore. Mercer's jaw tightened so hard the muscle jumped near his ear. Medic Walter Green arrived with his satchel, took one look, and muttered, "Jesus Christ." He checked her pulse, checked her pupils, and looked up at Haskins. "She needs morphine, hot fluids, and a real hospital. Now, can she travel? She travels, or she dies." Two soldiers cut poles from a broken fence. Another stripped canvas from a wrecked truck. No one had to be told what to do. But every few seconds, someone looked back at the German officer. He was in his late 30s, tall, sharp-featured, with the stiff posture of a man who believed discipline could still protect him from judgment. Private Nolan walked toward him, rifle low. "What did you do to her?" Richter said nothing. Nolan stepped closer. "I asked you a question." The German officer finally lifted his eyes. "I am a prisoner of war. You will follow procedure." Barlow actually laughed, but there was nothing amused in it. "Procedure." Nolan's finger tightened on the trigger. Lieutenant Haskins moved fast and shoved the rifle barrel down. "That's enough." "With respect, sir." "No, it isn't." "It is now." Nolan's face had gone red with rage. "He did that to her." "I can see that." "Then why is he breathing?" The question stayed in the air. Nobody wanted to answer it. Villagers had begun gathering near the road, half hidden behind a stone wall. An old man removed his cap. A little girl in a brown coat clung to her mother's skirt and stared at the nurse on the improvised stretcher. One woman quietly crossed herself when the Americans lifted the Red Cross blanket over the nurse's legs. Haskins looked from the villagers to the officer, then back to his own men. "Get her to Battalion 8. Move." Mercer and Green lifted the stretcher. As they carried her away, the nurse forced her eyes open one last time and found Haskins. "There were others," she whispered. "He chose them." Haskins leaned closer. "Others where?" But she was already gone into unconsciousness. That sentence spread through the platoon faster than any order. "He chose them." By the time they reached the next command post, every man in the company had heard some version of it. The German officer had tortured a nurse. He had used a cellar. There were other women. Maybe civilians. Maybe hospital staff. Maybe prisoners. No one knew. Everyone imagined worse. At battalion headquarters, Major Robert Sloan listened in hard silence while Lieutenant Haskins gave the report. Outside, engines idled. Rainwater dripped from tarps. Field clerks stopped typing when the word nurse came up. "Where is the officer now?" Sloan asked. "In custody behind the grain shed." "Guarded?" "Yes, sir." "By whose men?" Haskins hesitated. Sloan noticed. "That's what I was afraid of." A military police team was requested. A translator was sent for. A surgeon examined the nurse and confirmed blunt force trauma, burns, dehydration, and signs of prolonged abuse. Her name, they learned from her papers, was Claire Duval, age 26, attached to a French Red Cross evacuation unit that had disappeared 6 days earlier. When the translator arrived, he was a thin Belgian schoolteacher named Henri Valk who had joined the Allied advance after liberation. He entered the holding room with shaking hands and came back out 10 minutes later looking pale. "Well?" Major Sloan asked. Henri swallowed. "He admits detaining her. Says she was aiding enemy movements. She was a Red Cross nurse. He says the war changed that." Sloan's face hardened. "What else?" Henri looked at the floor. "He says he used force to gain names of wounded officers and convoy routes. He says civilians in the cellar were partisans." "And the women?" Henri was quiet for a long moment. Then he answered. He called them leverage. The room went dead still. Captain Louis Hanford, the battalion executive officer, exhaled through his nose and stared at the map table. "Do we have corroboration?" "Not yet," Sloan said. "We need it." Mercer, standing by the doorway, could not hold himself back. "With respect, sir, what exactly are we waiting for?" "A signed confession in triplicate." Hanford looked at him. "We are waiting because if American soldiers start shooting prisoners against walls every time the blood gets hot, then we lose more than discipline." Mercer did not blink. "Maybe discipline's not the thing being tested here." No one replied. Outside, word kept spreading. Some men wanted Richter marched to the nurse's bedside so she could identify him before he was hanged. Some wanted the villagers to judge him. Some wanted 5 quiet minutes and a blindfold. Instead, the officer sat under guard in a wooden chair, wet boots planted neatly on the floor, while the Americans argued with themselves. By evening, scouts found the cellar. It was beneath a collapsed veterinary clinic half a mile outside town. The smell hit them before they got to the stairs. They found restraints bolted to support beams. They found burned medical supplies, broken Red Cross crates, and a ledger with transport dates. They found 2 civilian women alive, both too frightened to speak above a whisper, and one dead Polish orderly wrapped in a torn hospital curtain. When Major Sloan saw the cellar for himself, he came back with mud on his boots and a face like stone. He picked up the field phone. "Get division on the line." The matter moved upward. From battalion to regiment. From regiment to corps. Most officers along the chain gave the same answer in different words. Secure the prisoner. Document everything. Wait for orders. The waiting was the hardest part. Claire Duval drifted in and out of consciousness through the night. Medic Green stayed near her cot. Once, just before dawn, she grabbed his sleeve and asked in a broken whisper, "Did he surrender?" Green nodded carefully. Her eyes filled with tears, not relief, but something darker. He thought that would save him. Green did not know what to say. By noon the next day, more witnesses had been found. A German medical orderly claimed Captain Karl Richter had taken over the cellar after a retreat and used the Red Cross personnel as bargaining assets. A local priest said he heard screams for 2 nights and was threatened at pistol point when he tried to intervene. One teenage boy said he watched Richter strike Claire with a riding crop because she refused to translate names from patient tags. The evidence stacked like sandbags before a flood. Still, the prisoner lived. Late that afternoon, the sound of engines rolled in from the west. Not supply trucks. Not ambulances. Staff cars. Men outside the headquarters straightened without being told to. An American flag snapped on the fender of the lead vehicle. General George S. Patton stepped out into the mud in polished helmet and riding boots, ivory-handled pistols at his hips, expression unreadable. He was not a large man, but everything around him seemed to pull tight when he arrived. The talking stopped. Even the wounded seemed quieter. Patton did not ask for ceremony. He asked for facts. Major Sloan gave them. The cellar. The nurse. The civilians. The witnesses. The confession by implication. The mood among the men. Patton listened without interruption. His glove stayed in one hand. His face gave nothing away. Then he asked, "Is the nurse alive?" "Yes, sir." "Can she speak?" Briefly. Patton nodded once. "I'll see her first." Inside the aid station, Claire Duval looked smaller than she had on the roadside, almost swallowed by blankets and bandages. An army surgeon stood at the foot of the cot. Green stepped back as Patton approached. Patton removed his helmet. "Miss Duval," he said, voice low. "I'm General Patton." Her eyes opened slowly. She looked at him as if trying to decide whether he was real. "Yes, sir," she whispered. "Can you identify the German officer responsible?" She did not hesitate. "Yes." Patton paused. "Did he harm only you?" Her eyes shifted toward the canvas roof overhead. "No, sir." "Did he use your Red Cross status against you?" A tear slipped into her hairline. "Yes, sir." Patton stood very still. The room went silent. Everyone waited. Then Patton said, "You did your duty under hellish conditions. The United States Army sees that. Do you understand me?" Her mouth trembled. "Yes, sir." He gave a small nod, replaced his helmet, and turned for the door. Outside, the command group followed him to the grain shed where Richter was held. 2 MPs stood on either side of the entrance. Inside, the German officer rose when Patton entered. He tried to recover his dignity at once. "I am Captain Karl Richter of the Wehrmacht," he said. "I request proper treatment under international law." Patton looked at him for a long moment, then at the chair, then at the mud on the floor, then back to Richter. "Sit down." Richter sat. Patton remained standing. Henri Valk moved into place to translate, but Patton lifted one hand. "He understands enough." Richter said nothing. Patton paused. His voice stayed calm. "You wore an officer's uniform," he said. "You carried the authority of a nation, the trust of your men, and the protection of laws meant for soldiers. And you used all 3 to torture a nurse who had already placed herself under the mercy of that same law." Richter swallowed. Patton took one step closer. The emblem on her arm was not a target. It was a promise. No one moved. The civilians in that cellar were not leverage. They were human beings in a war already filthy enough without your help. Richter tried to speak. In anti-partisan operations, Patton cut him off without raising his voice. "No. Do not insult this room by dressing cowardice as military necessity." The translator did not need to repeat that. Everyone understood it. Richter's face changed then, not to shame, but to the first faint trace of fear. Patton looked at him as if measuring something rotten. Then he said the words the men in that shed would remember for the rest of their lives. "You are not standing before me because you are a German officer. You are standing before me because even in war there are lines so clear that only a man determined to become less than human would cross them." The room went silent again. Patton paused. "When this army fights, it fights hard. But it does not hide behind women bearing the Red Cross. It does not chain civilians in cellars. It does not confuse helplessness with victory." Richter's hands tightened on his knees. Patton leaned slightly forward. "You mistook surrender for safety. It is not safety. It is judgment delayed." No one breathed. Patton straightened. "This prisoner will be transferred under guard, fully documented, fully treated, and fully delivered to military justice. Not because he deserves mercy, because we do not let men like him decide what kind of army we are." For the first time since Patton entered, Sergeant Mercer looked away. It hit him harder than shouting would have. Patton turned to the MPs. "Double the guard. No one touches him without authorization." "Yes, sir." Then he looked at Major Sloan. "See that Miss Duval is evacuated to the best care available. And make sure she knows this command believes her." "Yes, sir." Patton moved for the exit. At the door, he stopped and spoke without turning around. If this man had met a weaker army, he'd already be dead in a ditch. The fact that he will stand trial is the only honor left in this building, and it belongs to the Americans. Then he walked out into the fading light. Only after he was gone did anyone in the shed seem to breathe normally again. That night, no one asked why Richter was still alive. They understood. Not all at once. Not comfortably. But enough. Claire Duval was evacuated before midnight. As the ambulance loaded, Sergeant Mercer stood beside the rear door, cap in hand. She recognized him and managed a faint nod. "They listened," she whispered. "Yes, ma'am," Mercer said. "They did." She studied his face for a second. "And you?" Mercer looked toward the grain shed in the distance, where extra guards now stood in the dark. He answered honestly. "I wanted something easier." Claire gave the smallest, saddest smile. "Easy is why men like him exist." The doors closed. The ambulance drove off. Weeks later, with Germany collapsing and the war grinding toward its end, the men who had been there still remembered the ditch, the cellar, the silence, and Patton's voice cutting through all of it. They remembered that rage felt righteous. They remembered that revenge felt simple. And they remembered that justice, real justice, demanded more discipline than hatred ever would. In war, Men are always being pulled downward. By fear, by grief, by what they have seen, by what they want to do after seeing it. That day near Hammelburg, a tortured nurse, a captured officer, and a silent room forced American soldiers to face a question far bigger than one prisoner. Not whether evil deserved punishment. It did. But whether good men could punish evil without becoming easier servants of it themselves. Some wars are remembered for battles. Others are remembered for moments when no one fired a shot, and the soul of an army was tested anyway. What would you have done? Let us know in the comments below. And if you want more World War II stories where humanity, war, and difficult decisions collided, make sure to subscribe.